Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Game Logic from the Rounding Off Infinity Gaming channel on YouTube, one of the co-hosts of the Enough to Keep Going, a weekly video games podcast on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube. Back with another episode of the Games Memo. This is the Games Memo for June 4th, 2026. My apologies. I stepped away from this solo cast for a while because I was kind of discouraged by what I personally feel is incredibly poor reporting on the games industry by the games media. And quite honestly, there wasn't a lot of news to go on. And I still kind of feel that way, but I think I've decided that I'm going to try and make an adjustment and muddle through. The show is back. It'll probably return back to a weekly ongoing starting this week. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but that is the plan. Tonight, I invited on a guest, Mr. Tobi Adeyinka. Tobi has written a series of posts on LinkedIn reviewing the past couple of decades of marketing history with Xbox. I was very impressed by the write-up. It is a rare instance of truly intellectual works in the gaming reporting space. It is very analogous to a lot of the industry analysis and assessment and marketing study and case study types of writings that I try to do on my personal blog, 10 Keyless, over at the Rounding Off Infinity Gaming portal on the web. And so it seemed very much a kindred spirit in terms of the piece in relation to the work that I do and have done. And so I wanted to invite Tobi on board. Several of the things that he posted in the memo sparked several ideas, concepts, philosophical ruminations of my own. And so I kind of wanted to bring him on board to have that discussion because I just felt it would be easier than trying to write it all out in long format on Twitter. So, Tobi, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are as a gamer, the types of games you like to play, and the platforms you play on?
So thank you very much for having me on. My name is Tobi. I will say I'm a long-term gamer. Over the years, I've been following the gaming industry. Would I say I obsess about the gaming industry news, sales data, what a company is doing, what a company is talking about, what are their plans, what are their strategies. I'm someone that likes to read, so I studied pharmacy, so reading is not something that's hard for me. So I like to read a lot of things and, get informed about what's happening in the market. I worked in sales for a couple of years as well, after about 2 years of clinical practice. But my ultimate goal in the long run has been to get into the gaming industry. And I decided to learn about the industry as much as I can and, start putting some of my opinions out there. I just realized that there are a lot of things that are happening in the industry that I kind of saw coming, and I wish I had said publicly, a long time ago. And, so it won't be like, oh, he's just saying it now after it's happened. So I'm happy to be here. Looking forward to this discussion. I'm surprised you found the post so intriguing. I just decided to do that. When Asha Sharma was announced as the new CEO, I just asked myself, everyone keeps talking about bringing back Xbox going back to whatever it was. What exactly is Xbox? That was my question. And I said, let me just go back. Let's go and watch everything I can watch. Let's watch the interviews I can watch. Let's watch launch events. Let's look at articles. Let's, go online. Let's use AI now, try and pull up comments, try and find out sentiments from various announcements. And let's see how the brand has transitioned over the years and try to understand, everything. So I said, let me do that. And my first post was for the first two generations. I've gone back to complete everything to, the current situation. And the Xbox brand is very fascinating, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, the reason I found the writing so interesting was I find in this space, so first of all, there's a great difficulty in having a gaming conversation in the social media space because there are at minimum two different kind of parties, right? And there are people who are fans of gaming and ostensibly theoretically are gamers, although I often find it difficult to understand who they are as a gamer when I go to their page and I don't see them posting about any of the games that they like or what they're playing. So I sometimes have to question that credibility, but let's just take for the sake of argument that they are gamers and they are fans of brands. And it's like It's like the sneaker game. It's like the rap game. It's like they're fans of these brands, regardless of how the brands are performing on the market or their marketing, PR, voice tracking, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then there are those of us who have an interest in the business, in the industry, and approach it from an academic perspective. And so when those two groups meet, which I often feel that they shouldn't, like you should recognize when you're a fan and you're just a fan of a game and a gaming brand, and if it upsets you that somebody who's interested in the business is something that they say, you just need to understand the two of you are having different conversations.
Yeah.
You as a fan don't need any business or industry justification for why you like your brand. You don't need any validation. So just go talk to people about games. Then those of us who are interested in the business can have an academic, scholastic discussion about the gaming industry. But my personal feeling is, and look, I'm very high on my horse of arrogance and egotism tonight, so everybody's going to get it full blast. Like, I just feel like if you don't understand the tenets of the domain expertise that we're speaking in, that you don't really need to participate in the conversation.
Yeah, I do agree with you on that. I've had several issues with people in the past. When people say, "Oh, what do I know? I'm in healthcare or whatnot. How would I say I'm an expert in the gaming industry? I never say I'm an expert, but like I take my time to learn. I used to study Famitsu data way back in 2012. When I really started to really get into the gaming business and really trying to understand what's happening. I used to heavily go down on Japanese sales. I don't do that nowadays because it's kind of boring because Nintendo kind of dominates everywhere. So I don't really see the point in going there anymore. But I used to really obsessively check every time Famitsu puts out sales data every week. I'm there every month. Second puts out MPD puts out data. Just to really understand what's happening in the business. I remember 2022. I had this interaction with fans of Xbox when I think it was 2023. I mentioned that hardware is declining. Doesn't make sense to me. The consoles, third year. And I remember the pushback I got from many people is that, console sales don't matter. It's all about Game Pass. And I remember having so many, clashing arguments. And it always comes back to what's my interest there. I don't play Xbox. I'm like, yeah, I don't play Xbox. I play mostly on PlayStation. But I like good competition in the industry. I want the industry to go. And I'm seeing someone that is, in my opinion, making a terrible mistake with their whatever strategy they think is working. 2022, in my opinion, was a bad year for someone that wants to be a platform holder. And I felt that it shows in the hardware decline. You didn't have any major game out that year. That should be something that should be ringing alarm bells for everybody. But I understand when you're fans, someone saying something like that, you're gonna repeat whatever PR message everyone has said. Oh, it's Game Pass. Game Pass is what is important. But end of the day, if you sit down and do the numbers and sit down and predict where the subscriber growth is going to come from, where are the players going to come from, you will see that if consoles don't grow, it's going to be tough. And the only reason why I'll see that it was going to be tough if maybe PC and mobile was doing great numbers at that time, but they weren't doing great numbers at that time. And the whole Apple Google situation with the App Store at that time. So where were your phantom Game Pass subscribers going to come from to make it worth everybody's while? Was it going to be PC? PC users were not going to make up the lack of Xbox purchases. So the numbers didn't make sense to me. But I remember having those clashes with people saying, I don't know what I'm talking about. It's just Game Pass. I'm like, okay, we'll get to the play. We will see in the future what happens. Nothing more you can say beyond that. But I said, once you interact with fans, it creates a imbalance in the conversation that can't really be remedied.
Yep. So we're going to try and we'll probably dabble into elements of like, the physical performance of the brand on the market. There are some convergence points, but we're going to try and primarily talk about the marketing perspective tonight, as you wrote to. And again, one of the reasons I found this so interesting is because depending on the ongoing narrative and agenda at the time, probably at the time that you were having those conversations with people, they were probably asserting that marketing, voice tracking PR didn't matter. But as of late, right, I have suddenly been met with assertions that, oh no, marketing does matter, and like the whole reason they perform badly is because they weren't marketing. And I'm like, well, which one is it? But we won't get into that tonight.
Logo gate or something.
So I did. This was a great opportunity to have kind of a case study, decomposition, and detailed conversation and breakdown about marketing. I love the work that you did going back through the history. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm probably gonna struggle to bring up some of your items on screen, but let's start with your first article. I'm going to read pieces of it. I may not read the whole thing, but here at the start, evolution of the Xbox brand. I've been studying Xbox as a brand, not from a fan perspective, but through the lens of David Aker's brand equity model. Aker argues that brand equity is built across 5 dimensions: brand awareness, perceived quality, brand loyalty, brand associations, and proprietary assets. When those dimensions are aligned and well managed, the brand compounds in value over time. When they're neglected or mismanaged, the losses are often slow, invisible, and very difficult to reverse. Xbox's new leadership got me questioning what the Xbox brand actually is at this point, and that led me down a rabbit hole. It's become one of the most instructive cases I've come across for understanding how that process plays out in practice. So that kind of brings us to our first thing. Can you kind of quickly go through a baseline explainer of what the Aker brand equity model is?
So yes, just to give you a background, I wanted to really approach this from a marketing framework kind of a thing, because usually I'm a salesperson. I've worked most in sales, but I have marketing skills here and there. Of course, I take a couple of marketing classes and courses. If you check my LinkedIn, you probably see a couple. I really wanted to make this as academic as possible. Let me have a standard framework, to really analyze a brand, not just analyze a brand based on my feelings. Let me use a proper framework to analyze a brand and break it down into something that is easily understandable. So the ACAS framework was what I found was the best. There were other frameworks that I was thinking of using, but I ultimately decided to go with ACAS framework. There's this several other frameworks that were there. I wanted to try and use maybe perceptual mapping as well, but I figured this was the best to properly align my ideas, and I think properly outline the key things I felt Xbox did right or wrong, depending. So the ACAS brand model essentially breaks down, a brand into 5 different, domains. So brand awareness, which talks about how well known your brand is. Perceived quality, what's the quality of your brand, hardware, whatever products your brand puts out. Then you have the brand associations, this is one that may be tricky for people to understand, but this is what's your brand associated with? What feelings, what emotions, what type of vibe is your brand associated with? So, maybe like Nike, is associated with achievement, great athletes, what's the association of your brands? And then the same thing about is brand loyalty, how loyal are your customers? And finally, proprietary assets, your IPs, your franchises, whatever. What are the key things that you have that differentiates you from your competitors in the market? And that's why I went with this, because I felt I could properly put Xbox into those brackets and then be able to adequately express my ideas from going back in history.
So that kind of brings us to the first kind of comment or question or topic that I really kind of wanted to explore. I thought it was very interesting where you talk about when those dimensions are aligned and well managed, a brand compounds in value over time, and that converged with a conversation that I've been trying to have since last year. Kind of when I appeared on the scene, if you will. So during COVID in 2000, like I have been on Twitter for across various accounts because I've canceled some accounts, but for about 16 years. I originally showed up as a mobile device reviewer, and over time, and as a tech reviewer, and over time, and then I moved into like reviews of different like content, media, movies, TV, comic books, gaming. But I never really socialized with this whole Twitter, YouTube circuit. And so the personalities in that space I never paid attention to. When I would see them come across my timeline, it was always some lemon-faced, like ridiculous expression thumbnail, of somebody like talking about a piece of news that like literally just went live like 5 minutes ago, and I'm like, how can you possibly like understand what it is you're doing a YouTube video on? So I never paid attention to this group. And then in 2020, 2021, I think 2021, I ran into some people like in Spaces had started, and I kind of got sucked into this orbit. And so over that time, the first thing that I tried to talk to people about was the difference between revenue and profit, which is often like, or just a lot of like financial terminologies, right? Like
it seems simple, but it can be quite.
Yeah, so cost of goods sold, operating income, net income, gross profit, a bit like how those things differ, how overhead costs are allocated, what is P&L, right? So I tried to kind of explain that to people. And then I think the next major theme that I tried to get across to people was this notion of ARPU, which again, over time, certain groups of people have refused to like onboard to. So my most recent theme, the third theme over the last 5 years, has been this discussion of CLV, which is customer lifetime value. And I found that your discussion of how brand value, brand equity compounds in value over time is the marketing equivalent of this notion of CLV. And when I've talked about CLV, what I've tried to explain to others is that, look, PlayStation strategy, right? A probably core tenet of PlayStation strategy is to get people to onboard onto the console and then get them to remain within that ecosystem, right? And that's why they have exclusives, because first of all, it's product differentiation. People recognize and acknowledge that those exclusives are there and that PlayStation is the only place to play them. And then because that is the reason that you got in, there's often a disconnect between, people spend 40% of their time playing like the black hole games. And I'm like, that may be what they do once they are there, but they didn't onboard to your platform because of the black hole games, because they could have gone anywhere to play the black hole games. They onboarded to your platform because of product differentiation. They were presented a delta between one brand or the other, and they make decisions on the things that are different. Nobody down selects based on things that are the same. Right? So so they get into the ecosystem for that reason, and so PlayStation, understanding that, continues to provide those exclusives, because we often get the discussion, well, exclusives don't make sense anymore, the attach rate's not high, blah blah blah. I'm like, no, they have people in their ecosystem who came there because of the exclusive, so they need to continue feeding them those so that those people remain and they don't go elsewhere. And all of this compounds into what I, not what I call, what the financial term is of customer lifetime value, which means I buy a PlayStation, I buy exclusives, I continue buying games within that ecosystem. Even if I play the black hole games, I purchase microtransactions.
Yeah.
I buy the speakers, the headset, more DualSense controllers, the
DLC,
charging dock,
everything. Yeah.
Yeah. So all of this stuff compounds over time. So I'm like, look, if you refuse to understand ARPU and the difference there is there on PlayStation versus Xbox based on total revenue divided by MAU, then you need to acknowledge that if a PlayStation customer is spending more money per year than the average Xbox customer, then that is compounding over time. And so the whole point is that if I take a singular gamer and I get them into the ecosystem and they stay in the ecosystem for 20 years, they spend a certain amount of money. And that is what I'm trying to maximize. I'm not necessarily trying to maximize attach rate. I'm not necessarily trying to maximize unit sales per title, right? It's a portfolio-based strategy.
Yeah.
So I thought your note, and then that conjoins with the concept of marketing, right? Like I build up brand equity, and in order to keep that brand equity high, because if I start to hemorrhage the brand equity, then it's an uphill battle to
gain it back. Yeah. So
right.
Everything you said just makes so much sense, and lifetime value is such an interesting concept, and it's so tied to your brand, how much brand equity you have, essentially, because if you want players to get into PlayStation, maybe PS2, and you want them to still be there now. You want players to come in here, new young players to come in here in PS5, and you want them maybe PS7, whatever, should still be there. That's the goal. Lock them in, increase the switching costs. So They can't, switch to other brands easily. They don't want to lose out on Last of Us or other games that they will play. Because the more you put, games everywhere, the more you lose that thing. One of the reasons why I was confused by PlayStation strategy of putting games on PC. I never really thought that was a great idea. Though many people said, exclusive games are so expensive, they have to cover development costs. That seems to be the would I say vibe I'm getting from many people. But I'm like, were they really there to just to put out those games to make large profits on those games alone, or were those games there to make the console be the place people want to play games? Like you can't do both. You can't say you want to be a software publisher and be a platform holder and do two of them very well. Like even Asha Sharma Xbox, she had an interview with Bloomberg earlier. I just watched the interview recently. She said the same thing, that you get to realize that if you want to own a platform, you just have to have some exclusive content. It just doesn't make sense to have a platform and say everything we have on a platform is everywhere, but just come to our platform. Unless you have one crazy feature, or, you have something that, one crazy invention that you can't get anywhere else. I don't see the point of having that content everywhere. You have to have some exclusive content. It just makes sense to ensure that, those games, Uncharted, Last of Us, Crash, all those games that they've poured in money, time, a lot of money into marketing, a lot of money into pushing those games everywhere. You have to utilize that value that you spent on. You have to take that value long term. Someone like Capcom understands this well. They've been fantastic with their IP management, how they do their release schedule, how they market their games. Like, you have to be able to look long term for those brands. PlayStation and has done well, but even they've had some, in my opinion, strange decisions that I think everybody in the industry just went crazy after a certain point in time, and maybe now everyone is trying to wake up and say, okay, maybe we went the wrong path. But at the end of the day, the brand value is very important. Just how much money do you want to squeeze out of your loyal brands, brand followers for years? That's just a key thing.
And so I want to read, some more excerpts from your piece. You said, at the peak of the Xbox 360 era, most of those dimensions were working well. Xbox Live was a proprietary asset unlike anything else on the market. Halo drove perceived quality and brand prestige. The community was deeply loyal. Xbox positioned itself as the place for cutting-edge shared gameplay experiences, and within a decade, much of that equity had eroded. I went through several E3 presentations, watched more than 50 ads, and explored fan commentary from 2001 to 2013 to try to understand when the shifts happened and what the signals look like in real time. There's an ongoing exercise in applying brand theory to a real-world case, and I'll be sharing what I'm learning in a series of posts and maybe a video as well. Feedback and pushback are genuinely welcome. I'm still working through the conclusions. Some of the things you mentioned here kind of brought up this concept of ecosystem entrenchment. And so, we talked a little bit about how, like, when you erode brand equity, it's tougher to recover it. Particularly if, like, your strategy's shifting, right? Your brand identity has started to kind of drift, right? And it looks like something different. Now you're trying to rebuild from a different point of origin back to the same peak. And so you don't know whether or not you're going to achieve that because your past peak was based on a different brand identity.
Yeah.
One of the things you mentioned here, the community was deeply loyal. Xbox positioned itself as a place for cutting-edge shared gameplay experiences, and within a decade, much of that equity had eroded. Kind of brings us to the Xbox One generation, because during that time period, the fact of the matter is that you had defections. And a lot of the conversation that I've had in the last year, there's been a hyper focus on this notion of people who switch. And part of my pushback on that has been like, guys, it's not solely about like this whole thing of like, you're not going to get, because Piscatella made the comment, well, good luck getting people to switch because you have a game that they can't get anywhere else. And I'm like, I didn't say it to him directly, but I was like, Matt, it's not just about getting people to switch. It is about new customer acquisitions, new gamers coming into the space. But this topic is about the defections, so you do have to cover down on both customer acquisition as well as customer retention. And the fact of the matter is, in the Xbox One PS4 generation, when Xbox was outsold 2-1, that means that there were a number of Xbox players who crossed the line, right, and went over to the other side and are in PlayStation now. And so, part of this topic is now that they're in PlayStation, now we have this discussion, and they're entrenched, right? They've made purchases, like the CLV discussion. They've made investments.
Switching cost is high enough for them,
Right. So now this brings us to this discussion of exclusives. And there's part of the Xbox community who's like insistent that you need exclusives, and it's interesting because they are citing the correct theory that we have tried to explain to them for years, that exclusives are important. They are a key component of product differentiation, down selecting, customer acquisition. They are important. However, I now look at the Xbox business where they are now, and what I've said and what I've calculated is like, look, if they go back to an exclusive-centric strategy, that is a console generation that it will take at a minimum because of the eroded brand equity, as you've mentioned. The fact that people no longer associate the brand with the concept of exclusives.
Yeah.
So you're going to spend a console generation, you're going to spend 7 years trying to theoretically rebuilding a customer base that is attracted to your brand for exclusives and hits the numbers that you need, right, to start that momentum driving downhill. Because first you've got to rebuild the brand identity around that, redefining the brand identity that you just finished spending 5 years identifying as something else. And then you're going to have to get people to buy into it, right? So you're going to have to spend time voice tracking it, getting the message out. And then you're going to have to spend, right, additional delay time getting people to respond to it. Because there's going to be a period of time where people are like, yeah, I hear you, but I don't buy it.
Yeah.
So, like, on this concept of exclusives, like what is your own like over under on like what you think exclusives would do for the Xbox brand at this point in time?
So it's two things. I'm a firm believer that if you are a platform holder, you have to behave like a platform holder. If you are a software publisher, which Xbox currently is, probably the number 2 software publisher globally, you should behave like a software publisher. If you try to play both games, you want to eat your cake and have it, something's going to suffer. You can't play both games easily. Now, if you want to have a platform, a viable platform, Xbox has so many games, I don't think they can make all their games exclusive. It's not realistic. Call of Duty, lots of Bethesda games, you can't make them exclusive. I think making something like Starfield exclusive in the first place was pointless. You have to look at games that make games that you want to be exclusive to the Xbox brand and you want to tie to the Xbox brand, and you have to make games that you want to be put everywhere. You have to make it clear. You have to find a way. You have to brand. If you have to, tie Microsoft Gaming to the games they're going to publish everywhere, create another outlet for Microsoft Gaming or something and make it for the games will go everywhere. Use that. Use Xbox branding for Xbox games that are going to be Xbox. Now, a lot of people say, console sales are declining. The future is maybe the cloud, mobile, or platform that can go anywhere. The problem I always say, and the thing that I keep saying is, for people to transition to the cloud, for instance, you need to have a stable, loyal base on consoles first. Even PlayStation knows that, and I keep saying PlayStation is going to launch a cloud platform or whatever in the future. No one is sleeping. Everyone is watching everybody. And there's one thing PlayStation knows how to do is copy. They know how to follow what Xbox or Nintendo does and do the same thing and do it in a way that will make it better for them. So you have to be aware that if you're going to transition to cloud in the future or whatever hardware platform you want to transition to, maybe everybody plays games on cloud with smart TVs. We don't buy a console, we just buy a controller and we play through there, whatever. The players are going to have to come from somewhere. PlayStation is also going to do a platform like that. You're not going to be the only one on cloud. Nintendo is going to do something like that eventually. Why are people going to switch to your platform and not PlayStation or Nintendo when that time comes? It's exclusive games. Netflix has exclusive movies. HBO has exclusive movies. Disney Plus has exclusive movies. Why don't you see Disney Plus put their movies everywhere? Doesn't make any sense. They want people to come to give them money, not give Netflix money. And the whole exclusive and logos thing, the whole logo noise nowadays. I'm like, this is the first time I actually see people defend. Like, to me, is completely bonkers for you to put another person's logo on your own platform marketing show. It's one of the most confusing ideas ever. Like, I get it that you are publishing these games everywhere, but make another showcase for Microsoft Gaming or something. Make another showcase for Microsoft Gaming or maybe Bethesda Gaming or whatever, or Activision. Like, do something else. But if it's gonna be Xbox, Xbox is your platform. Only show Xbox logo. Everybody can find out where the games are. Amazon sells other people's product all the time. Amazon's not gonna advertise that you can buy this same product on Walmart. It doesn't make any sense. Like, these are basic. Like, I see people arguing this thing, but these are basic marketing things that if I was in a marketing room and someone told me that let's put the logo of all those things, like, what's your aim here? Is it to sell as many copies of these games, or you want to make people buy these games on our platform? If it's just to sell the game anywhere, fine. If that's your aim, you want to sell the game, you want to sell as many copies as much as possible, that's fine. But if you want to sell the games on your platform and take your full, $70 from the cut from the price, and not give Steam 30%, not give PlayStation 30%, then you can just do that. But that's the problem with Xbox. When you're trying to be two things at once, they clash, and you can't really get a clear vision, a clear strategy of what they're trying to do. And I said it again, no matter what anybody says, exclusive for a platform, for any platform, matter. If you don't want to have a platform, if you just want to sell games, then that's fine. Don't do exclusive, and it doesn't matter. But if you want to have a platform, you have to have exclusive. I will die on that hill till it doesn't turn out to be true. Like, yeah.
And you bring up a good point. It's actually an interesting concept. I've had the same concept, minus the segmentation. I've said if they were going to do something, I could see where the Bethesda and the Activision games would continue to be published multi-platform. And if you want to pull something back and walk it back, then differentiate between your first-party studios that originally were not under a separate publisher banner, right? I think then you run into then you will evoke a question of then what does that mean in terms of Game Pass, because now that business is not aggregated and concentrated within the same kind of multi-publishing strategy as it was before. That P&L is going to look different. The cost allocation is going to look different. I would assert that you probably will need to, and I believe that that's why the experimentation is there with Call of Duty in terms of pulling it out of Game Pass and saying that it's going to get there a year later, which is what they are doing with Day and Date outside of the Ultimate tier, right? Which at the lower tiers, those games will get there. They will get there, or at least they will get there to the middle tier. I forget what the time delay is, but it's after some time delay. So yeah, but the notion of if you're going to follow that strategy, then saying that they're Activision Bethesda game or Microsoft gaming games, and then say your first party exclusive stuff, those are the Xbox games. That's super interesting and something.
Yeah, because I think why I said that also because of Game Pass. I don't think day one games for everything on Game Pass makes sense. Like, it's one of the key things I've argued people on. I check charts every time, and I'm asking myself, when Doom Eternal launched last year and Starfield previously, I'm looking at the NPD charts. I'm like, okay, I'm not seeing very high charts, and okay, many people are playing on Game Pass, but the problem is how many people are on Game Pass. I'm like, is everyone? I think at that point maybe about 24 million players on Game Pass subscribers. Then is everyone gonna play Starfield? How many new people subscribe to Game Pass because of Starfield? Those are the kind of questions you'd be asking. Because if the same people just paying, you're not growing. So how many new people did Starfield bring to the Game Pass? Call of Duty launched, it brought some new people. Were they sustainable? Obviously, Call of Duty didn't make as much money, so they had to increase the price of Game Pass, which, of course, high price, subscribers are declining. Another issue. So I think day one games are it's a huge risk. The brand has committed to that, and it's a huge risk that they took, unfortunately. But I think the best solution is separate Activision and Bethesda games, the core Xbox franchises, Halo, Fable, the likes. Let them launch on Game Pass. You know, just know that these games you are spending money on them to grow your platform. Like just keep some games that this is just for the growth of the platform. The other ones are to just sell games and make money. Like I think there needs to be a way to separate the games, the publishing business from the platform business. You just have to break it down because this joint way of going about it, I don't think it works. Maybe Asha Sharma and Matthew Ball and everybody can bring up a strategy that makes sense, and they're well paid, they're very well experienced, so maybe they can do something that can do it together. But right now, I don't see how they're gonna do that well. You need to separate the publishing business from the platform business, and it needs to be clear. Now, we want to grow a platform because one of the things I noticed from all the videos I watched, people say, "Oh, Xbox, started talking about entertainment movies and stuff." Like, no, they've been talking about entertainment since way back. It wasn't a huge emphasis, right? They were focusing on the games initially, but they always had that ambition of expanding the audience, reaching out to millions of players, growing the console gaming industry, not just selling consoles. They always were thinking about growing the audience, and everything that they've done has been in service of that. But the execution has been, in my opinion, at times terrible. Is what I good ideas. Xbox has fantastic ideas, fantastic strategies, visions, but the execution is like no. I have to sit back and ask who told you to make 3 Gears of Wars in Xbox 360 generation? Why did you make 3 Gears of Wars? Why did you have almost 4 Halo games in Xbox 360 generation? Halo 3, Halo Reach, Halo ODST. Like why so many Halo games? Plus the spin-offs in just a few years span. Who was the head of the IP management telling you that you are devaluing our brand by putting out so many games? Let people wait for the game. Nintendo does that a lot. They can put out Mario every year, but they don't put out Mario every year. It doesn't make any sense. Mario every year.
Yeah, the Kind of Funny Games Daily actually had a very similar conversation recently and mentioned that they interviewed Reggie Fils-Aimé a few years ago, and that was one of the things Reggie said. He's like, look, what we convey to our fans and our fans understand is like, if you see a Zelda game coming, you are probably very likely to only get one Zelda game that generation. Now, granted, you got Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, so you got that's not a hard and fast rule, but in general, like you said, you're not going to get 3 or 4 games in a generation. Now, I will say there's another conversation, right, which cuts against that grain, which I want to say I think a former Final Fantasy senior developer mentioned, and I agree with this. I talked about it a little bit last night on Thrifty's Gamers Den podcast, which is that look, we're also in an age where it is very difficult for new gamers to identify with this concept of IP franchises and sequels because games are taking 6-7 years to make, and so you're having instances where a kid plays a game, the first iteration of a game, in their 10, and when they see part 2, they're graduating high school and getting ready to go off to college, and by the time they see the third one, they're graduated from college, out in the real world, trying to make ends meet, trying to figure out how to pay bills, and you're telling them, hey, you want to complete the trilogy, you need to buy a $650 to $900 console, right, and buy the $70 game that like the last one you played was 7 years ago. So it's an interesting cross-cutting.
Yeah, but I think live service games have kind of solved that problem for but not everybody can have a successful live service game. If you really want to attract a young audience and take them for you want to break that waiting period. But I think there's another way of doing it, which I think I always praise. I think CD Projekt Red has a very, very good strategy in keeping their games relevant, and same thing with IO Interactive. CD Projekt Red, Witcher 3. I love the way they structure their trying to keep interest and keep their fans engaged till Witcher 4 comes out. DLCs, expansions, 2 expansions. They do a Switch ports. They come out with a graphics remaster for the new generation of consoles. They put out some free updates for the series on Netflix. and now they're doing a new expansion again. You know, I think all that is not these are strict actions to ensure it's part of the launch planning of Witcher 4 as well. So ensure they can carry their audiences from Witcher 3 all the way to Witcher 4 and not leave them blank for years. So largely studios that are creative have found ways to keep players engaged till the next entry of the DLC, and internet now makes it available for you to do that. Same thing with Cyberpunk, even though they say they're not doing anything on Cyberpunk anymore, they still brought out a PS4, a PS5 Pro patch recently. So all those things are just efforts to ensure that the game keeps coming to top of mind and people can continue to remember the games till the next entry. Same thing with IO Interactive and Hitman. Same game, just updates, new missions, just to keep the core fan base engaged till the next entry comes. And I think that's what most developers are not doing right now. Yes, it's difficult to do that, but I think someone like Capcom has realized that if they can also do that with some games as well, do remasters, do DLC expansions, just keep the fans engaged to the next entry, and then you can continue with them from there. It's not easy thing to pull off, but I think that is what the industry started to do now, and I think that's fine. My challenge is I understand everybody wants to expand, and you said audience growth is very key, and it's tough right now to get new players. I'm been thinking about how you're gonna get younger people to come into console business, come into the AAA business and whatever. But right now, for a platform holder, you need to hold your base, you need to hold your core, and then when you have your core, find ways to expand and bring in new people while ensuring that your core fan base still comes along with you. Or you just have to target people that will join your core. You need to have a clear, defined message. You can't be switching messages up and down every generation and saying one thing. And I said Xbox has good plans, but execution is terrible. Like I think I went through some of the various weird execution they had in those generations, and even the next one, because I went back and watched the other videos as well. And I just one of the things that is something subtle I will mention is how they spoke regarding competition. Like Phil Spencer, in one of his first E3s as the head of Xbox, he said something that struck me, and I like, oh, that's strange. He said, our friends at Sony and Nintendo, PlayStation and Nintendo, had their conferences the other day, and I said, friends, why are they your friends? These guys are your friends. Those are your competition. Like, why would you say friends? Just someone may say, oh, that's why am I making a big deal about that? I'm like, no, that speech was written by someone in comms. That speech was written by someone in comms. So it's not something that he just came out and said on the whim. Someone wrote that, and I'm sure someone high level in marketing saw that and said, it's fine, let's call Nintendo and PlayStation friends. I'm like, why? They're not your friends, they're your competition. They are people you want to beat. You are, at this point in time, the least in the market. You should be like, okay, maybe not. Okay, Wii U was doing badly then, so maybe you can say damn Wii U like, but at this point, you shouldn't be saying you're friends. You're not friends. Like the original Xbox, Peter Moore's Xbox will never say that. Like, no, like they were throwing jabs at each other. Jack Trenton and the other guy on PS3, the guy that was always in the PS3 ads, I've forgotten his name. Is blanking out. The fake marketing executive they had that always appeared in PS3 ads. I don't know if you can remember his name.
No. I honestly didn't pay a lot of attention to PlayStation marketing.
Oh man, I can't believe I'm forgetting it. It was always saying SVP of something. He's always changing his title. Great marketing campaign, by the way. PlayStation at that time. Kevin Butler, yes, yeah. So they were throwing jabs at each other, making sly comments. I remember when Xbox had the Kinect launch where they had people wearing white ponchos up and down. Very weird way to launch product, but they're throwing jabs at each other. That was a very competitive time because they were neck and neck for a long time with their console sales, so they were very competitive. So now you're behind and you think it's not the time to be playing friends. No. These are not the gaming audience is a competitive audience. You have to be competitive in everything you do. Like, that's just my own opinion about that. Somebody says console war stuff, but I don't see. There's a reason why it worked for Xbox 360. It worked.
Well, and that's one of the assessments I've always made about like the Phil Spencer thing, and I think in a decade, right, there's going to be very surgical and precision decompositions, right, and breakdowns and kind of assessing, right, what the reality of his regime was. But one of the things I've always said about him as a persona is that Phil Spencer was three different people, right? He was what I call a gaming philosopher, and he believed in kind of this utopia of being of all gamers, which quite honestly, I don't necessarily disagree with, and I agreed with very much so at the beginning of his regime, which is why I was very pro Phil Spencer right at the outset of his takeover.
I'll say me too. I'll say me too. Me too, yeah.
Which was very, so again, there was a part of him that was this gaming philosopher. Then there was a part of him that was a businessman, right? And then there was a part of him that, in my mind, was a futurist or technologist, meaning like the businessman part of him was brass tacks, bottom line, right? This is the person who says, when he's asked about the layoffs, he says, in no way am I ever not accountable for running a profitable business.
Yeah.
That's businessman Phil Spencer.
That's businessman, yeah.
Then there's the futurist technologist Phil Spencer, which aligns a lot with the gamer philosopher Phil Spencer, but that is the Phil Spencer that is talking about, there's going to be a fundamental shift in the way we build video games. We are building this platform. I used to call it the CB-DOM, which I was told is a horrible acronym, and I don't disagree, but I never came up with better. But like, this is when he and Sarah Bond were talking about, we are building a place for you to create, build, deploy, operate, maintain, and monetize your games, right, on a singular fabric, which they were talking about the cloud, but they were talking about more than just Azure, right? They were talking about a place with a digitally attached storefront. They were talking about a place for you to build your applications cloud native. They were talking about then being able to deploy, operate, and maintain them. They were talking about developer tools, yada, yada, yada. And they were positioning that choke point interdiction for large-scale publishers who they would force to ask themselves the question, hey, why are we spending billions of dollars, part of which we're paying to Microsoft, great, because we're not a cloud service provider, so we have to build it on Azure, or we're paying that money to Amazon and we have to build it on AWS, or we pay it to Google to build it on GCP. Why are we spending this money to build out and maintain our own development environment that we have to spread across all these studios, still not have them entirely on common tools, spend the money to build out proprietary engines like Frostbite? Why are we doing all that when Xbox is saying they can provide that to us for cheaper and make it easier to monetize our game? So that's the technologist futurist Phil Spencer, right?
Yeah.
And my problem with the Phil Spencer persona is, my feeling of his problem was that he was very unclear which of those personas was talking, right, at any one point in time, unless you like observed him laser close, which I will claim and assert that I did over the time. And then when those messages were in juxtaposition to each other, I'm like, Phil, you can't have businessman Phil Spencer say, in no way am I accountable for running a profitable business, when technologist, futurist, gamer, philosopher, whatever said, the reason we're buying these studios is so that they can put their games in Game Pass, and that will be a protective blanket, and none of them will have to worry about making payroll on a Friday. Then you turn around and say, right, so, but at any rate, what I did want to move to is, you bring up, like, all of this discussion leads us, I think, very well into the discussion of what is the Xbox brand, which was a question you asked yourself while you were doing this writing. You said at one point, Xbox positioned itself as the place for cutting-edge shared gameplay experiences, and that goes to what I said about, like, there is this solidified, congealed, and you've said it too, notion of a brand identity. What is Xbox? And now we've, like, swam through years of what is Xbox? Everything is an Xbox. So an Xbox can be a handheld. It can be a VR headset. Is Xbox a publisher, which their fan base gets very agitated about? And I'm like, look, and I think you've mentioned the same thing. If you are 90% publisher and 10% platform owner, you are a publishing business, right? Just like when we talk about Google and we say Google is whatever percentage, 70%, 80% an advertising business, and 10, 20%, right, a cloud business or whatever you want to call it, we say that they are an advertising business. Apple, does Apple do services? Sure, they do Apple Music, but they are 90% a hardware company. So we talk about Apple as a hardware company. What things did you, and then this paragraph from your second one I want to read too. The original Xbox launched in 2001 with a clear identity, powerful hardware built for core gamers and designed for online play. And that terminology, core gamer, is huge because kind of as Xbox came into the space, that's kind of when that label came into being. We didn't really talk about core gamers before then, but Xbox being the brand of, I often talk about them and why I love the brand being the aggro gamer brand, right? And, Halo, Forza, Gears of War. And then there was a point where, again, Phil Spencer said, we need to be more than that. And they started drifting away from that core identity. So kind of talk to me a little bit about what you felt about what is the Xbox brand today and how did they get there and how did that change and what difference does that make?
So how would I describe the Xbox brand today? I'll say I don't know what the Xbox brand is today. As I said, last year I thought the Xbox brand was a device agnostic platform that wants to be everywhere, but also wants to be a game publisher that publishes games everywhere. So it was a platform that says you can come and play games here, or you can go and play games anywhere else you want to play your games. And to me, that's a platform that doesn't have an identity. That's a platform that doesn't say it wants to keep you. That is a platform that has no identity, essentially. I don't know what the Xbox, as it is now, I can't say what the Xbox brand is. But in the past, I could give a clear answer. I said the Xbox brand was the brand that wanted you to get more out of your console. It was the brand that wanted you to have shared, player experiences. It was the console that's claimed at that time gave you the cutting edge gameplay with, best graphics, best console you can buy, good hardware. And the original Xbox actually delivered on that, great hardware, great exclusive games in Halo. It did all that very well. Forza Motorsports. It brought out some amazing franchises. Fable. Yeah, the original Xbox killed it. Even though they started well, they were saying if you want to get a console that can do so much, come to Xbox. I remember watching several of the ads they have with this Dark Master with Xbox Live. And one of the things that really hurts watching everything was Xbox Live and how Xbox Live just went dead. I talk about that because Xbox Live, watching many of the E3s, watching many of the interviews, Xbox Live was the thing. It was the thing that made Xbox different. And slowly but surely, we saw Xbox Live turn from, the place where gamers can connect and have fun experience together to the place where you can everything online just gets wrapped into Xbox Live. Watching Netflix, Xbox Live, watching ESPN, Xbox Live, everything just being lumped into Xbox Live. Like obviously Xbox Live you didn't have a core identity of what the Xbox Live name was. So you just put everything in Xbox Live and, let's just use Xbox Live. It's a popular brand, so let's use it for everything we can do. So the brand transition, I think in the Xbox 360 generation, they were riding, high. I think I'll give Peter Mock and the team then credit. They really knew what they were doing initially. The ads, some of the ads you have, there was this ad where you have, I think it was banned eventually, where people were using finger guns to shoot themselves in the subway. I don't know if you've seen that ad. Very creative ad. But the whole sense of that ad was, everyone can come together and have, incredible experiences together. There was a cops and robbers ad where, have people in the community running around playing, cops and robbers, essentially. And people there watching them. There's another ad where they had, Project Gotham Racing, I think, or Forza, one of them. People were watching races and a lot of people just, sharing the experience. And that was the core thing about the Xbox and the Xbox Live then, best gameplay, great experiences, and we all can experience these things together. And that was one of their core messages. And Xbox survived Red Ring of Death, which, in my opinion, will kill most brands at that point. It should have killed their brand, essentially. The hardware failure rate was, some say, almost 50%. That is a huge brand killer for most people. But the Xbox survived that. How they did, I don't know. But okay, I know because they had the games. They had the games. They had the quality. Everything was riding high. Halo 3. Halo was the biggest entertainment product at that time. They had one of the biggest, they had the biggest entertainment product at that time. You understand? They had the audience, they had the gamers, they had the franchises. They were riding high. They were competing with Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo on hardware sales. Like what they did in the second generation is incredible. They sold about something units in the first time, and then doing 80 million units the second time. Like they were killing it. Yes, of course, many of those units were probably failed Xbox 360 units, but at least they did well. They sold a lot, and they were selling, software. Publishers were making money on it, which is very important in game publishing, game platform business. Publishers were selling one on Xbox. That's why Activision was able to sign, the Call of Duty ad deals they signed with them initially, those periods of time, and they were really enjoying the platform. And towards the end, after Don Matrick, I can't blame him. I think he got a mandate, and the executive just lost control of what the brand was. I think they really forgot what they were trying to achieve. The core gamers were trying to attract, kind of like, let's try and attract new players. And it was the tone of the ads shifted. There was this "Live Your Moment" ads that they were running, campaign they were running. I remember watching one of the campaigns, and the campaign has someone watching the screen, and then the camera goes to the back of their heads, and tries to look at what they were imagining and thinking while they're watching the screen. I remember watching an ad that had someone watching a movie, and it was an Xbox ad. And I asked myself, how does this play out for Xbox? Does someone buying an Xbox watch a movie make sense? It didn't really make the idea there was confusing me. Like the ad just felt so different from the platform that I had watched, several videos. And I think right now it just showed that they were trying to do something different. And I understand you want to expand the audience, but you don't expand the audience and sacrifice your core. That is something I think Xbox really messed up. And if you watch many of the E3s, you could slowly see them adding more in movies, music, things in many of the E3 shows till we got to the Xbox One, review, which was one of the worst reviews I've ever seen ever. Second was probably the Wii U review, but that's another thing for another day. But that was horrible. Like I remember the first 10 minutes of that review, they did a voice demo with Kinect. Why? Like who wants to know you can use your voice control to control the Xbox? Like, those are some of the things that I was shocked by. There was one E3 where Dana White came on, and I thought he was going to announce a UFC game. But surprisingly, he wasn't there to announce a UFC game. He was there to announce you can watch UFC on the Xbox. I'm like, oh, that is disappointing again. So those are some of those things that came up, and like, they were trying to make Xbox the entertainment thing. But I thought they just didn't think that smart TVs would come up and do what smart TVs do and make people watching movies and stuff on consoles irrelevant. Essentially, they didn't really bank on that. I think they just got high and they thought, oh, everyone will keep watching things on console. Smart TVs came, and everything else, and just kill that notion. The console is a console for a reason. I think you need to sell the console for games first and then expand to other things.
So I want to give a shout out to Hero Down Under, one of the regulars of the channel. Hero is asking if you, I mean, it's up to you if you want to say this on stream or not. Is asking if you are Nigerian.
Oh yeah, yeah. Lagos. No,
cool. I think
I lived in Ogun State though, but Lagos.
Okay. So Hero, I forget what country your background is. So if you want to mention that in the chat, I'll let Toby know. So this is a good point to bring. He says, "My name is Alawunmi Tawose."
Oh, nice. Nice to meet you. We'll check when I get it. When I go to YouTube, we'll check on it.
He says he's from Abeokuta, but Lagos raised.
That's nice. That's nice. So I stayed in Abeokuta for a while, about a year. Yeah, okay. But I lived in Ogun State, so not too far from, like an hour from me. So it was nice.
Very cool. Very cool. And he says he's going to check out your writings on LinkedIn.
That's nice.
So this is a good point to take us to the discussion of Xbox Live, which you've gotten into a little bit. You wrote Xbox Live wasn't just a feature; it was a platform advantage that competitors couldn't easily replicate. And this is a thing that I've talked about very often. Like there was a point where, like in that Xbox 360 generation, Xbox Live was the equivalent of like what Game Pass is now, of what, or well, I shouldn't say of what Game Pass was at the beginning of the generation. What Play Anywhere is now, right? With this attempt to kind of like stamp their feet right on this notion of this proprietary asset within their brand. Xbox Live was everything. It characterized so much of my life during those years.
I can imagine.
During the 360, it's where I met friends. It was a time when you could, you mentioned Project Gotham Racing 3, and like so many of my Friday nights were like you get on, I get home from work, I order the pizza or Chinese food, right? I immediately log into Xbox Live. The food shows up at some point. I'm on Xbox Live playing Project Gotham Racing 3, or PGR, as we used to call
PGR,
it. Eating dinner, and like you could go into a PGR lobby and make friends. Like so many of the people that I established long-term gaming relationships with, that I would go on to podcast with, were met during that, and it's because it was a great service, and you pick, like I used to say all the time back then, the old console war used to be because PlayStation Network was free at the time, free. During the PS3 generation, at least at the beginning of it. And they're like, oh, you guys pay for Xbox Live. I'm like, yeah, because I play on both Xbox and PlayStation. And let me tell you, PSN is poo-poo. Like, it was horrible. And then on top of that, nobody used it. So you'd go into a PlayStation lobby and like nobody's on comms. And like as an Xbox player, you're like, this is super, like we were super tactical. Like we're playing Halo, we're playing Gears of War, we're playing Rainbow Six Vegas. So like it was a natural vibe to get into a lobby and have people calling out enemies, to talk about what they were doing, where they're going. We used to get on people for like not talking. In fact, in PGR, we used to run lobbies, and we were like, if you came into the lobby and we like talked to you, you didn't say anything, we're like, oh, this dude's not on comms, and we would boot him. So it was a cultural vibe, and so that thing was very tightly coupled to the notion of the Xbox brand identity.
Yeah, so I remember watching, when they launched Xbox Live initially on the Xbox One. I remember when they bundled the headsets with Xbox One. With the original Xbox, they bundle the headsets. I'm like, that's such a good idea, reduce the friction there. You already cut the friction, someone having to go and buy a headset. So that's good thinking. Like that's what you have when people are thinking and executing phenomenally well. Like they were executing on a very high level on their vision. Like they thought of everything possible. And like you said, many of their ads were just what you just said here. People on headsets, creating moments. They had, the celebrities that everyone usually have, but you have them with the headsets having fun. A lot of the demos they had on Xbox Live was about having fun, making friends. So many Xbox Live videos with Dark Master. I don't know if you remember that guy. Dark Master was always there, and it was so fun. Like I wanted, like I was watching. I wished I was there. I unfortunately didn't game much during that period. I wish I was in that period watching those. I wish I was, building community with people on Xbox Live, watching everything, because it just seemed like that was the place to be. Like I remember watching one of the things I remember noting down, one of the E3s I won. I think it was E3 2007. No, was the E3 after E3 2007. I remember Xbox felt like that was the place to be. That I think that was the year Halo was coming, Halo 3 was coming out. That E3 was so exciting. Like, I felt like I was in the moment and Xbox was having the time of his life. People didn't like that E3, some of those E3 because they had sales slides there. I'm a salesperson, so I love seeing sales slides. So I'm the odd one now, but that E3 was fantastic. If you leave the sales slide and everything there, they were hitting. The games were fantastic. The game trailers were fantastic. Peter Moore was like happy. He knew that we are in a moment where we are riding high. We are top platform. We have majority of the third party sales, everything. Xbox Live subscriber growth was growing astronomically. We were about maybe 6 million at that point, subscribers at that point. They were doing fantastic well. And I'm like, yeah, this brand is so strong here. What went wrong all over the years? Like, I don't know, man. Like
So
it was a strong way. Xbox Live is actually, as I said, the core thing to the Xbox platform, and how Don Matrick and everyone else manage after that is just so sad that the brand is just the Xbox Live brand is dead now. Yeah,
yeah, and yeah, and I mean, and what it drove in those E3s that you watched, right? It was kind of a knock-on effect, but it was also very centric to the brand identity. Is Xbox to me as a gaming system kind of brought back the feeling of games in the 80s where what console and what platform you on was about friendship. Because back in the 80s with the NES, Super NES, and the Sega Master System and Genesis, a lot of it was about couch co-op, right? So a lot of the
yeah,
commercials were like your buddies being over at your house playing games, and then that started to kind of fragment, particularly as the gaming demographic got more complex, right? It started to
yeah,
include young adults and people playing, right? They weren't just for kids anymore. Xbox really brought back that notion, and the reason part of the brand identity cemented and got so strong was because it was really one of the brands. It was the key brand about friendship, more so I think than the other brands.
yeah,
Paul's Gaming Live in the chat mentions it was the first Xbox Live was the first unified online service for online gaming, even ahead of PC. Um, I, I don't entirely agree with that in terms of ahead of PC because I mean there's to me there's no equivalent in PC. Like there is no unified gaming service on PC. It's all about I mean there just isn't. Like the fabric is too wide and it's too
yeah,
segmented and it's not a unified platform. The variance of the way people play on PC is wildly different. And the only thing that is any kind of binding factor is Steam, and even on Steam, people don't necessarily use that same fabric for everything, right? It's I mean, the closest thing to a unified service today on Steam on PC, I would say, is Discord, which is
yeah,
communications plane, not necessarily interoperability plane. So I feel like it's a little different. I absolutely agree with you in the console space. In the console space,
yeah.
it was at scale the first really unified online gaming service. Like you had online gaming services before, but you didn't have any that operated at scale.
Yeah, and one thing
Um,
that I noticed that I need to make sure is that Xbox Live had this thing, one of the demos I think it was even Bill Gates that had one of the demos talking about how you can see your invites and everything on your Windows PC. You can get your gaming invites on your calendar. You can send and receive invites or chat on PC. So if they were ahead of their time in terms of linking. I think they also had a linkage to the Windows Phone as well. So if you had a Windows Phone, you can also do that as well. Connect the Xbox app and send and receive messages. So they were thinking way ahead of many people, which I think was where they should have continued to push, maybe in technology. The whole entertainment push, they, yeah. When I look back, I'm like, you can see where they decided to switch and change the narrative. I remember the E3 2009 when they said you're not gonna show slides, any sales slides anymore. Frankly, everyone did that. Both Sony and Nintendo stopped showing slides, I think around a couple of years after that. But in my mind, I'm like, if you're not gonna talk about game sales, at least you have to be bragging every year. Be bragging, just come on and brag. Oh, we sold this with even if you didn't, you're not leading in Xbox is losing, 2-1. Come on and say some achievements boldly. We are meeting this number of players. We're doing this better than the competition. Come on and say it boldly. But after a while, and Spencer came in, just became very friendly, very sanitized. And I just the brand just did not just seem the same anymore. And yeah, I think moving on to Xbox that really did stuff on the PC. They brought back stuff on Windows. They try with Windows gaming, Windows Live gaming, and what on the Vista. They were the first ones to bring out major games like Fight Simulator on PC years back.
Yeah, let's not talk about Game for Windows Live, because that was definitely not a win. That was absolutely one of the low points of
that was a low point, but they tried. They tried.
Yes, they got back to it. Like I having lived through that, like I never understood. I mean, and this is again, even going back then, this is a point where, and maybe this was like one of the points where like things were starting to loosen up. It was like, you guys literally just came out and voice tracked that Xbox is going to be the unifying brand for gaming across Windows and the console.
Yeah.
And what you guys roll out isn't tight Xbox integration, right, to Windows Vista. And eventually Windows 7, you guys roll out games for Windows Live, which makes no sense. I'm like, you have Xbox Live. Why are you like replicating? Why are you doing something that's redundant and branded differently when the whole power is from the brand? So anyway, yeah, I mean, this is one of the things I wanted to get
anything about it. How would I put it? I think they're thinking something that I'm thinking now. You want to separate the platform from the different platforms. So you want Microsoft Windows to be a platform, Xbox to be a platform. And my thinking is, you're already showing you want to merge all platforms together. You're already showing the capabilities of you being able to take Xbox anywhere on your Windows phone and PC. Why not just call it Xbox? I know that, okay, Xbox, this is Microsoft's platform, Xbox. The problem I have is that games for Windows Live now has caused a lot of compatibility issues for many games, annoying as hell. But I just feel that they really should have just looked at unifying the ecosystems together and really working to ensure that the PC Xbox end was freakingly good. Like I told someone I find it very annoying that Valve has a better store than Microsoft has on PC. It is ridiculous to me that they have a better store than Xbox has on PC. Like, it should not be said. Everyone that's gone through Microsoft history knows how essentially Google started its destiny on Windows, essentially, and how Google was able to say, you know what, we are gonna remove our destiny from Windows, and Google was able to pull it off. And anyone that's looking at Steam now is looking at Steam is trying to do the same thing. Steam is trying to move away its destiny from Windows as much as possible. So you should be saying, these guys cannot come to my house, make so much money in my house, and then go somewhere else and build another house. It doesn't make any sense to me. Your store should be the best store on PC. You are a gaming publisher. It's some of those things that I ask myself, like, who are the people on Xbox that are looking at these things happening? And I just feel maybe the guys there sometimes they just want to make I don't know if the business side just feels, let's focus on the things that are sure to bring in value. So let's release games as well as possible. Let's put games on Steam and everywhere. No, a game should. Why? That's another thing I have issues with. Why is your game on Steam? Your store should be better than Steam. Your game should be on Steam. If your store is good, they will come to your store. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's tough, right? I mean, it's I don't inherently disagree with you. What I'll say though is Steam is 70 to 85%, right, of the PC gaming market. So it's like, again, that's an uphill battle. And the thing when I talk about the uphill battle is it's who has the patience and tolerance for that. And you go back 10 years ago, maybe there would have been the patience and the tolerance for that from the C-suite, from shareholders. But now you're looking at a group of people who they've been enduring this constant pretzel twisting, right, flip-flopping, and I firmly believe, and I could be wrong, I firmly believe that part of what has gone on is people were told things for many years, Amy Hood, right? You can't put your games on other platforms, right? It'll do this, it'll do that. And I think Amy Hood hit a point last year after the acquisition that she's like, nope, time out. I'm done. I'm tired of hearing it. You guys, you and Booty and Sarah have come in here and sold me this stink oil story for years, and I don't care. Here's what's going to happen. You guys are going to hit 30% margin. you guys are going to sell these units. You guys are going to achieve this. You guys are going to achieve that. I'm not going to tell you how you're going to do it. That's up for you guys to figure out, right? But I'm going to tell you from now on, these are the metrics. You guys are going to be held accountable to them. And then I think the knife twisted further because I think last year, particularly with the Game Pass increases, it got worse. And she finally hit a point where she was like, I am now going to tell you how you're going to structure Game Pass. I am now going to tell you how you're going to tier it because you decided to put Call of Duty in there and now we're having a financial problem. So now I'm going to tell you, I'm going to deploy people from my financial organization into yours to tell you how you need to structure and tier this stuff. And that's part of the reason is why the Game Pass tiering last year came out so weird and goofy, because I think people had their hands in that bucket who were not part of the gaming industry but were bean counters, right, and helped them structure it.
Yeah. So, I think I have to agree with that because that tiering last year, I remember having a discussion and I asked, why does it seem like the console players are getting the wrong end of the deal in this Game Pass scenario? Why are PC players? Because I'm like, console players have to shell out a lot of money to get consoles. Game Pass should not be more expensive for them. Why is it more expensive for them? It never makes sense to me why PC players have the cheaper version of Game Pass. They get all the day one games at cheaper price. So there's so many things that I looked at. I'm like,
it's very true. Like, this whole thing of like Game Pass is the best deal in gaming. I'm like, no, you guys missed the bus. PC Game Pass is the best deal in gaming. Like, they're even better than you are. So I'm going to go on to a couple other topics I want us to get us through in time. We got about 7 minutes left. One of the things I do want to mention is because you mentioned the when we all play together, right? Yeah. Voice tracking. And I've mentioned it before, but like one of the things that I always disliked is that when we all play together was originally their battle cry for accessibility. And accessibility was a discussion of people who required additional assistance to play games, people who had sight acuity problems or sight color differentiation problems, or people who didn't have the digital dexterity. They had some impairment that like made them using controllers different. It was all about accessibility and meeting that accessibility community where they were. It got co-opted into this multi-platform strategy of when we all play together, we all win. And again, this is one of those things that got swept under the rug, and like there were lots of noise, like lots of hatred and vitriol whenever you brought it up. But I'm like, this was a thing that was used to speak to the community who needed accessibility help about Xbox being a good place for them to play. Now it's been used to feed this business strategy about multi-platform stuff. And I felt like of all things that felt scuzzy and sleazy and, yes, I am hiding something behind my back, that was one of the things that always bothered me.
I think that just goes to show you that the Xbox brand just kept losing direction. Once again, it does come down to the strategy. Once they're trying to expand the audience, you want to get new people. Sometimes you lose your core and the visions you have for certain brand decisions eventually. And I think for the Xbox, the overarching goal of let's reach 500 million players, something that they've actually said since almost several years back. The average, they wanted to get 500 million players. That just overrode everything in their decision making. But the problem is, and the thing I always say, if your core audience is being lost, how are you sure you're going to get new people to join them? That's always the problem. And every business has to take risk. And but I've noticed that when it comes to brand continuity, that seems to be a major problem. They just don't know how to continue. And it look at the franchises, Fable, like they're trying to bring back all those franchises now. Fable, look at Forza Motorsport now. Everything, many of those franchises that were killer on Xbox 360. By Xbox One generation, they were lackluster. And this generation, they've been not been so great. And maybe now they're trying to reboot many of them. It will go well with Fable. I hope it goes well. I don't have so much faith in Halo campaign involved next year. But Yeah.
And Toby, I don't know if it was intentional, but we lost your camera.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there.
Okay. So I want to go ahead and move on to kind of the last part, and before I kind of really give it to you, to talk about this part, your conclusions. The last thing I want to mention is, well, two things I want to mention is you and I have similar sentiments, and I say this all the time, and despite the fact that I say it, I get called an Xbox hater. I think strategically they often land on the right idea. Strategically, they say, "Look, I completely agreed with, hey, our key competitors are AWS and Google. Because of that, we have to play the MAU game because we need to put up a defensive line that says, if you guys ever try and come over here to gaming, like you're never going to catch us, right, on MAU, because that's what those Silicon Valley, big strategy, big tech companies are concerned about." I completely agreed with Game Pass as a subscription service because, quite frankly, if they hadn't put Game Pass in place, we might not be here talking about Xbox today.
Yeah, I do agree with that.
And then the last thing I'll mention from a marketing perspective, but same thing you say. What I always say is, I almost universally agree with every strategy that they land on. What I disagree with is their execution, and then I disagree with their marketing and PR and voice tracking around it. I'm like, because they've just hit points where they just blatantly lie to people, and I'm like,
only for games.
I'm like, you guys can't talk to us. Like the customer base, the addressable market you've lost is those of us who do not want to be talked to like we're stupid. Like, you can't come out and put Sarah Bond on stage and say, you will be playing all of these games in 12 months.
Oh man.
And then in January, right, in the developers direct, put Forza Motorsport up on screen and say 2023. And I'm like, hey, time out. You just were on the stage and said we're going to be playing this in 12 months. That should at best say H1 2023, because we're supposed to be playing this game by June.
Yeah.
And then 6 weeks later, you tell us Starfield is delayed after saying you weren't going to talk about it at the show, at the developer direct, for reasons, right? It turns out the reason you didn't discuss it was because it was delayed. You tell us Forza is delayed.
Silk Song didn't come out until last year.
Yeah. You tell us the only 4 games, and I know there was a caveat, right? It was only 4 games. I said at the time, we're going to do this and we're going to learn. And I said, you guys need to understand, like, when they say they're going to learn, a big company doesn't say we're going to learn unless they plan on repeating the activity, right? Based on the lessons learned that they talked about. But it's, but the point of like how we know there was a lie in there was in August at Gamescom opening night, you tell us Indiana Jones is going to PlayStation 5 in spring of the following year. And I'm like,
they've been working on it before.
Exactly. I'm like, this is where you guys lose the plot. So, but the last thing I want to say, again, before I turn it over to you to close this out, is despite all the things that I've said about like that, I feel the golden age of Xbox marketing and PR under Phil Spencer, right? So during his time, he had it right, in my opinion, 2016 to 2020. When there was the rolling thunder of 2016 to 2020, actually, I would say 2016, maybe 2015. But anyway, the progression was backwards compatibility program.
Yeah.
Game Pass, studio acquisitions, PC Game Pass, play anywhere, right? Buy one, cross buy. Like all that stuff, the Winning of Hearts and Minds campaign in the back half of the Xbox One generation, when they knew that they had lost the competition, I was like, you guys are doing the right things and saying the right stuff. You're lathering people up to go into the next generation. But then again, then the problem is then you go into the next generation and the execution isn't there. So, but my point is that despite whatever negative thoughts and feelings I have about marketing and PR under Phil Spencer, there was a point where they were getting it right. And then 2020 to the end of his regime, they entirely lost the plot.
Yeah. So just to wrap up, you said something that really, I termed the Xbox Series generation the generation of broken promises, because that's what I call it. They just keep breaking promises. You can't say one thing and you change it the next day. And I someone that really loved Phil Spencer initially when he joined. I loved that period of time when you called it. I felt that was a perfect time. I remember telling someone that this new Series S generation, I think they have the perfect play. They realize that they may not be able to win lots of market share, but if they can have a cheaper console to, maybe erode PlayStation's share a little bit, or maybe get someone to get a PlayStation and a Series S, maybe get a Switch and a Series S, it will make so much sense. And over time, they can now build it in the next generation and, even take even more share at the end of the day, because now you have people that will probably build digital libraries on those consoles and take over. But unfortunately, as you said, execution terrible. No Halo at launch was the worst decision that could ever happen for a launch console, even if it still sold well. But when the game came out, it wasn't good enough. Multiplayer was great, but single player wasn't good enough. You had 2022 where they had 0 major games in a whole year. I don't know how they allow that happen in their lineup roadmap. I don't know how they didn't see that was going to be an issue. How badly would you do to not have one game? Even PlayStation, as bad as PlayStation does in this generation in terms of their first party, they try and make sure they have one major game every year, at least one major AAA game as they can do, even if it's something like Death Stranding or whatever, on Ghost of Yoti that they did last year. Something major, it just makes sense. But to go a whole year, no. And Phil Spencer is a great CEO. I love his time on Xbox, but towards the end, it just seemed like the brand was doing badly, and Phil and some influencers and some guys online were pushing the idea that everything is fine. I don't know who gave people the idea that console sales don't matter. Wherever those things come from, bad things to put out. The whole 4 games exclusives are good. No, you don't need to exclusives. So many PR mistakes and things that they kept saying. That's E3 2002. No, E3 is 2022, where they mentioned that games in 12 months thing. I had to go back and watch it. I remember, because I had to make sure what exactly did they say. Did they say, maybe in 12 months? They said you can play these games in 12 months. I had to go back and check.
I went back and I did a very long post at the time before the Mea Culpa tour of Redfall.
Yeah.
And I went back, I took that out of the transcript, I posted it. I was like, this is the problem. This is what was said.
Like that, yeah.
You put Sarah Bond on stage, you say these things, right?
Sarah Bond said it, Phil Spencer said it.
Yeah.
I had to go back and check, because they said it.
And I said when those game when those game delays came up for Starfield and Forza, I said, this is the problem. They said this thing, they came up here in January and acted like they had never said it. And they talked past it, and then they delayed the games, and you guys are saying everything's fine. And I'm like, you are just ignoring the fact that they're talking to you like you're dumb. They're talking to you like you don't remember the last thing that they said. I personally, as a consumer, find that disrespectful. You talk to me like I'm stupid. I find that disrespectful. What happens? Redfall comes out. It's a complete and utter failure. He does the Mea Culpa tour. And what does Phil Spencer say? We failed on the 12-month plan. I told you guys, but you didn't want to listen. So, so the thing I want to ask you to kind of wrap us up was, okay, so you've written these 3 posts. We've had a discussion about it. We've kind of debriefed, right? And parsed your incremental findings. What are your, groundswell conclusions after having done this study? And if the answer is, I've got another article to write, I'm still parsing it, right? I'm still that's a fine answer too. But are you hitting a point where you have conclusions, or are you still going to dig into this a little more?
So I've probably dug into this to the end. I'm probably going to do another round of posts for the other generations. So I've already done my research on that as well. But I'll say this: I think the Xbox brand is still strong. They have very highly engaged players that are still on the platform, still love the platform. They've managed to secure a little bit of people that love the platform. And I think what will get the platform to where it was in the Xbox 360 days is a clear vision, which they never really lacked. Clear strategy, again. And I think the clear strategy is something that they need to really work on, because that's one of the failures they've been having in recent times due to the publisher and platform holder dichotomy they're trying to push, which I don't think makes sense. They need to have a clear strategy of what Xbox, the platform, will be, and what Xbox or Microsoft gaming publishing will be. They need to really put a stamp on what those two things are and what they really need to be going forward. And I think the final thing is they need to execute at a high level. You can't be making statements like 12 games, 12 these games will be playable in next 12 months, and then maybe you have only 50% of those games being playable. Like, once again, those speeches were written by people in comms. They don't just say that. Someone wrote that down, someone approved that speech, and someone approved a definite timeline or in a communication material. I've not worked in marketing for so long, but even I know, from basic training, you don't give definite timelines unless you are 100% sure that you will do everything it takes to meet that deadline. When so many things are beyond your control, never give a definite timeline. And I like those are the poor execution decisions that you make. Another thing is, I think they need a CEO that is ready to. I don't know if Ashashama is ready for that. They need someone that is ready to be part of the community. They need executives that are ready to be part of the community. People say the whole parasocial stuff with Xbox exclusive is not great. That, for me, that's the Xbox brand. That's what they are. That's what Peter Moore was. Peter Moore with a tattoo of GTA 4, tattoo of Halo 2 release date on his hands. He was, I'm one of you. That was his selling point as an exec. They need people that are ready to toe that line, because that's what the core fans are used to. You need to have execs that are ready to toe that line. If you're not ready to toe that line, you may find it difficult to communicate. And if you say, okay, you want to evolve the brand past that, that's fine. But you have to be clear. You can't do both. You can't keep interacting with fans, but still, want to play the executive and not interactive fan like how Nintendo and Sony does now. You have to pick a struggle. So if you want to be all in, be all in. Be at the E3s, go to the events. Play some games. You have to be there and be truthful, be clear in your communication. Don't be two-faced in the communications. I think Phil Spencer, as much as I love him, towards the end he made some. That 4-game things, I was so livid. I made a video then. I said, just come out and say you want to be a publisher. Don't. Your fans will be annoyed. Yes. But it'll be better that way than come back and you do what everyone that has a brain knows they're going to do, which is put out more games on other consoles. You don't start with 4 for nothing. I was so pissed off then, because I felt that was a betrayal with the Xbox fans, because the lineup just seemed to be getting good. This was a time where Xbox fans were meant to be, bearing the fruit of their long wait of terrible releases and, no exclusives and terrible games or whatever. This was a time to really enjoy the fruits of that waiting, and you didn't say no, we're gonna put all the games everywhere. Like, man, that for me, that is a gross betrayal of the loyal fans. And I think that is where I think they need to just make sure that they remember who their core fans are, and they stick to the vision and whatever strategy they have, and they ride it to the end. They communicate it clearly to the fans. This is where we're going. This is where the Xbox brand is going. If either you're there for the ride or you're not there for the ride, and everybody finds themselves anyway. The brand might die, whatever. Brands rise and fall every day, but you need to pick a strategy and run with it to the end. And I think the brand will do well. I still believe the Xbox brand will do well. I think they have an opportunity to do great things. I'm always worried that their cloud strategy, their device agnostic strategy, Sony can easily do that as well. And Sony will take their loyal fan base, their core fans, and they just move them over to cloud. And Sony will continue doing the dominance they've been doing every day. Nintendo will do the same thing, move over to the cloud, and they'll continue dominating as well. And Xbox will still be there trying to play catch up. Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot. It's been a really great discussion. I appreciate the way, the points we were able to have, differences of opinion and kind of talk through those. I think that's an art and a framework. I often talk about, the Socratic method should be one of the baselines of our discussion format within the gaming conversation, but that is often a lofty goal, which, is not to be achieved, largely due to the grifters that we have in the space. But I really appreciate the conversation tonight.
It was great. That's great.
Great discussion and breakdown, focus on marketing and PR. Yes, we did get into some of the strategy and execution things, but we largely, I'd say, 72% stayed on the topic of marketing and PR. So I appreciate that, because it is a special, segmented, different component of overall strategy, beyond product, beyond supply chain management. There's a lot of parts to a business, and marketing and PR is one of those. And we've gone through times over these last 5 years where we've had a fan base that has asserted it doesn't matter. There's no such thing as brand equity. Nobody cares about brand management and brand protection. And I'm like, okay, well, that's just not true. So I appreciate having this session. I do want to put a pin in our calendar, because what I want to do is I want to come back a year from now and have this discussion after Asha Sharma has had a year in the seat. Like part of what we didn't get into tonight was our feelings and assessment over what the brand has been doing since her takeover, which I think is another interesting conversation to have. But we'll put a pin on that and come back and have this discussion in a year. I would say actually in a year before, we've got their showcase coming up on Sunday. But
true.
I'd like to have this conversation kind of in the May 2027 timeframe, so that we kind of get our assessments out before their next showcase. After she's had her first time on the stage, really making promises and commitments.
I'm looking forward to it. I really want to see what she's going to say. She had an interview today with Bloomberg, and she said some. She was kind of candid in certain ways. I want to see how well she'll do. I'm kind of, would I say, bullish on her. I think she will probably do well, but let's see.
Yeah, definitely. I would also want to say thanks so much for everybody who came to the live chat. We didn't have a lot of time to interact with the room as it filled up more and more. So Hero Down Under, Retro, Paul's Gaming Live, Thrifty, thanks so much for coming through. We had a great conversation on your show last night. I'm trying to see if I caught anybody else in here. I mentioned Retro. Josh Ayers, thanks so much for coming through as well. So until next time, take care of yourselves. Stay safe out there. Play the games that you like. Come here to talk to us or me about the games that you love. Once again, my name has been Game Logic from the Rounding Off Infinity Gaming channel on YouTube, one of the co-hosts of the Enough to Keep Going weekly video games podcast on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube. The plan for this Sunday, we were going to try and do 2 shows so that we could do the PlayStation State of Play and Summer Game Fest opening night. We were going to do that on Friday and then do a second show on Sunday to cover the Xbox Showcase and the Future Game Show. We are not able to do that because I'm not available Friday night. So we are doing a single longer show that will probably be 2.5 hours is what we're going to try and keep it to, where we cover all 4 of those shows and maybe some other satellite stuff of other shows that we've watched during the week. That show will probably go a bit early. I know a lot of you guys here know that we regularly do that show, Enough to Keep Going, at 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. It is probably going to go at least 7:30 p.m. May go as early as 7, but I think it's going to go at 7:30. A lot of that depends on how much we see at Summer Game Fest opening night and the Xbox Showcase and how much we have to fill up the agenda. So just keep your ears to the ground. Pay attention mostly to what I say on Discord and any posts that I make on this channel or the E2KG channel. It's very likely I will not be on Twitter as much or maybe at all. So just keep your ears to the ground. Thanks so much, Tobi. My guest tonight has been Tobi Adeyinka. So I appreciate you. Some great write-ups that you've done on LinkedIn. Please give Tobi a follow. I don't have your Twitter handle in the show notes, but I will add that tonight. So thanks again. I appreciate you.
Thank you very much for having me on. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend.
All right. So until next time, good night, good luck, and good gaming. That's going to do it for me. and Toby. We're out of here.